Good afternoon. This week we read the Ten Commandments. The story of the giving of the Torah is repeated each year twice, once in the book of the Exodus and the other time in the book of Deuteronomy. Within the words of the Torah, of the giving of the Torah, are found the secrets of the world, the secrets of prophecy, and the rules for good living for all of mankind. The sixth reading of this week's Torah portion, we read what is called the Decalogue, commonly known as the Ten Commandments. It's a misnomer. The 10 statements of God, the 10 declarations. There are more than 10 commandments there. There are actually 13 or 14, depending upon how you count them. But the communication of the 10 statements of God parallel the 10 utterances of creation. And there lies a significant, incredible connection between them. This has been shown by the Arachim people, that the 10 so-called 10 commandments and the 10 utterances of creation, as well as the 10 major statements in the creation of the Mishkan, all not only parallel each other, but actually complement each other and together become perfect squares. I'm not going to go into that. It's an incredible discovery of how the letters of the Torah are so precise that when you add the process of creation to the process of communication of God, those parallel statements become a number which is a perfect square. Like 10 times 10 is a perfect square of 10, 12 times 12 is a perfect square of 144, 144 is a perfect square of 12, 169 a perfect square of 13, and so on and so forth. When you add up the letters of the first commandment with the first statement of the Torah, the second commandment, the second statement, utterance of the creation, so on and so forth, you wind up with a perfect square, as you do also with those statements that are connected to the creation of the Mishkan, or the temple, which indicates a connection between creation, Torah, and the service of man. But I want to address the significance of the giving of the Torah. In what way is the revelation of the Torah greater than the revelation that exists at the time of creation? After all, God created the world with 10 utterances, and there's an incredible wisdom that's found in those 10 utterances. And there's a whole science of Kabbalah that is dedicated to the discovery of the secrets of every creature based upon its relationship with the 10 utterances that are found in the beginning of Genesis. There's an interesting book written by Gerald Schroeder. I find his writings fascinating because they address issues that most rabbis don't want to discuss because we aren't equipped to know answers to them. That doesn't mean that his answers are correct. It only means that he addresses issues which rabbis sometimes are fearful to tread. I believe there will come a time when rabbis will tread on this, especially the Kabbalistic rabbis such as Yitzhak Ginsburg and so on, will address these issues in the future. But I want to address a point that Jerry Schroeder makes. The beginning of the Torah, it says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. The beginning, God created heaven and earth. And the question is, at the beginning of what? And the Targum, the translation of the Torah according to Onkelos, Aquila the Ger, appears to say b'chochmasa, with wisdom, because Bereshis is called the beginning of God's ways in the world, and wisdom in the scriptures is called Reshis darkly, the beginning of God's ways. And therefore, Jerry quotes extensively on these commentaries, these medrashim, but really is the Ramban who articulates it. He doesn't follow with the Ramban, but it's found in the Ramban that God created the world with wisdom, and Reshis refers to the beginning, the point of wisdom, from which God made that which isn't to be something, and created an ethereal kind of existence. And that's the point of wisdom. And at the same time, God created all the wisdom, all the laws of heaven and earth, all the laws of physics, discovered and yet to be discovered. And Jerry expands on that, and he says, Dr. Schroeder expands on this, and he says that God's wisdom pervades all of creation, and that all of creation has a mind, and that as a result of that, the earth has its own mind and could rebel against God. Where does the earth rebel against God? God says, let there be a tree fruit, and the earth created a fruit-bearing tree, not a tree that tastes like fruit. And so Jerry postulates that the earth had the option of listening to God and chose not to listen to God. Now, the concept that God's wisdom pervades the world is a universal concept in Torah, which means that the world is filled with the mind of the Creator. The Creator's mind, the Creator's wisdom, pervades all of consciousness and superconsciousness within the universe. But that does not mean that the earth has the ability to choose against the will of God. Let me just make it a little bit clearer. The greatest creatures in the world that are above mankind are the angels. You have to ask yourself, do angels have freedom of choice? And the answer is no, they have no freedom of choice. However, because they go by intellect and they choose according to intellect, it's as if they had a choice. Those are the descriptive words of the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or, and that is the light by which I go by. Angels are intellectual beings. Some angels are more intellectual than others, but all angels have wisdom that surpasses the wisdom of man. So says Maimonides in chapter 2 of the laws of the principles of Torah. And so, and it says it again in chapter 7 of the laws of principles of Torah regarding prophecy, that lowest angel have a higher awareness of God than does man. When man reaches prophecy, he reaches the lowest level of the angels, which are called Ishim. So according to that, you have to ask yourself, does an angel have freedom of choice? And the answer is no, an angel does not have freedom of choice. It's only man that has freedom of choice. An angel appears to have freedom of choice because an angel is rational. Rationality, however, does not give freedom of choice. So the question then is, how is it possible for an angel to err, for which reason an angel is punished? There are angels who are punished in the Bible's history recording, and is mentioned this way in the Talmud. The Talmud says that certain angels got 60 pulses of fire, 60 bolts of fire, which burnt them. Now, what exactly does that mean? It says in another place that God stuck out a small finger and he burnt the angels. All of this is metaphoric. It means, of course, that the angel is overwhelmed by the divine presence and becomes totally non-existent relative to the revelation. And that bittul, that negation, is a form of punishment, or a form of straightening him out. What exactly does take place? What takes place is that things are rational. Because things are rational, they follow a rational course. The angel who was behind the earth has awareness, but not awareness directly from God. It is the angel behind the earth that makes the decision. And the decision was made to make a tree that did not taste fruit, but became a fruit-bearing tree, because the rationale is that if you have a tree that tastes like fruit, then the squirrels and all the animals would bite the bark, would never wait for the tree to give off its fruit. They would consume the tree before it gave its fruit, and the tree would die. Since the purpose of creation of the trees is for them to survive, not for them to die, the angel thought this is what God must have wanted, that not that it tastes like a tree, but that the tree give off fruit, because it could be interpreted a fruit tree which bears fruit. Even though most wood is similar, we know that there are different types of woods that have an effect on wine, that give wine its special flavor. Oak is particularly good for wine and the winemaking process, and it gives wine certain scents and certain subtle flavors, that for which reason wine, especially the fine wines, are aged in oak caskets, not other types of wood, because that particular wood has a particular effect, and a particular taste effect and scent effect. So we see that the wood does have some element of taste and some element of scent. It's just very, very subtle. So the angel creating the tree didn't rebel against God. It just did not fulfill God's word in its simplicity, because the angel saw the problem and figured out the way in which the problem could be solved in the most direct fashion. So what was the reason why the earth or the angel was punished later on? The answer is because God can do anything in order to fulfill God's words. If God sends you on a mission, even if you were to become endangered by that mission, God has a way of protecting you. And indeed, this was the revelation of the Torah at the time of the giving of the Torah. It says that God picked up the mountain and surrounded the people of Israel, the children of Israel, with that mountain like they were in a wine barrel. Kof aleim har kigigis. He turned the mountain around them, over them, like a barrel. And he said, if you receive the Torah, fine. If not, this will be your grave. What exactly, what kind of a marriage ceremony would this be? Have you ever heard of a marriage ceremony where the groom takes out a gun? This happened recently. There was a woman who refused to accept an engagement ring from her boyfriend, and she got shot. Well, here God is the bridegroom, and he's asking us to become his bride. And what does God do? He pulls out a gun, takes the mountain, covers it over heads, and says, if you accept it, fine. If not, this is going to be your grave. Is that the way you're supposed to read it? Is that what happens? This is totally incongruous. This is not what you do at a wedding ceremony. That's not what it means. One of the answers that I solved on this is just the opposite. At the first revelation that God gives Moses, it says Moses saw a bush, a bramble bush, burning, but the bramble bush was not being consumed. And Rashi says this was a sign to Moses that the bramble bush was fulfilling God's mission, God's statement, God's purpose. And since it was fulfilling God's mission, it was being burnt, but not destroyed, not eaten up by the fire. Fire burnt, but did not consume the bramble bush. And this was a symbolic that anyone who goes in God's missions, even though it appears to be suicidal, but since he's going on God's mission, that God himself has designated, then he will not be harmed. And this is what God was showing the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, at the time of the Torah. The Torah makes us a nation apart. We can't eat what we would like. I know there's some people who go to McDonald's and they go to Wendy's and so on and so forth. It's treif. A Jew's not allowed to go there. You're not allowed to go ahead and eat certain things the Gentiles prepare. You're not allowed to go ahead and eat the host, the crackers and the wine at a Catholic gathering. You're not allowed to partake of a feast of other people's deities, other people's religions. And this is quite offensive to many people. And as a result of that, people hated the children of Israel. Ordinarily, you would think that this type of conduct would be counterproductive and would cause the people following this to be injured. So God is saying to them, if you accept my Torah, fine. And if not, this is where you'll be buried. It means just the opposite. In the future, I'm going to give you laws. You're going to have Torah laws that will appear to make you persona non grata to nations of the world. And you will think to yourself that if you follow the Torah's laws, you're going to be hated more. Therefore, you won't follow the Torah's laws. You'll be like everybody else, and they will love you. So the Torah says no. If you accept my Torah, despite the fact that the Torah looks to be dangerous to you, that the mountain's on top of your head, that the Torah law seems to be coming on your head and causing you death or destruction or harm, he says, no, that'll be good. But if you won't accept the Torah, and you think you're going to throw off that obligation and be like everybody else, and go to Wendy's and go to McDonald's and go to, go to church and eat there, and you think that this is cool, this is what is good for a Jewish person to do. A Jewish person should show that they understand other people's faiths. Torah says, no, that's where you'll be buried. That's what's going to cause the destruction of the Jewish people. Over 10 to 15 million Jewish people came from Europe over the years, over the last century and a half. There are only 5.5 million to 6 million Jews in this country. Why is it? There should be about 25 to 30 million. The answer is assimilation. When Jews behaved like Gentiles, eventually they disappeared. And that's what the Torah means. This will be your place where you'll be buried. You'll be lost as an individual. You will lose your mission. And that, for the Jew, is worse than death. When you fail in your mission, you fail for the reason you were created. So the purpose of God's mission is to do things when God says so, even if it appears to be counterintuitive. And when you fulfill God's mission, exactly as God says, then that will protect you. And this is something that the angel couldn't understand. How can you create a tree, taste just like fruit, and not have the tree die? And the answer is, God can do many different things. God could make it extra hard. God could make it grow much faster if something would eat into it. God could give it an extra measure of thorns, or bad smell, or some other factor that would allow the tree to taste like fruit, but not be consumed. The idea being that if we fulfill God's mission, as God says, in the simplest way, in its simple meaning, then that will protect us. That was something that the angel could not understand. Because an angel sees the problem and can't think that there is another solution other than going around the problem. Because an angel has linear vision. It can only see ahead of itself. It only focuses on the problem at hand. It doesn't see different alternatives. The human being, on the other hand, has what I call peripheral vision and is able to see other alternatives, other options. That is why the human being alone has freedom of choice, because we just don't opt for what is apparent. We opt for conclusions that aren't always so apparent. And the Jew who has faith in God will accept the word of God no matter what's going to happen. And this is where I disagree with Jerry Schroeder. The world is filled with God's wisdom, yes. And that wisdom is only part of the wisdom of the Torah, because the world was created by the Word of God, which is Torah. But the Torah gives us the ability to see beyond ourselves, to go beyond what is apparent. The wisdom that exists in the world that was revealed at the time of creation is linear. It does not allow for people or things or angels to see beyond it. Only through the Torah can we see the purpose of things and see beyond what is apparent. Only through Torah, through the commandments that God gave mankind. All of mankind has to fulfill the 7 Noachide commandments, and the Jewish people to fulfill the 613 commandments. Only man has freedom of choice, because man can go against his or her nature, because nature also is linear. An angel cannot see that one can go against his or her nature. That's why the angels who came down in this world were hopelessly immoral, because they couldn't control their impulses. And they saw only their impulses and the need to satisfy those impulses. They couldn't see an existence where one was not true to oneself. The human being, however, can control one's impulses. And by controlling impulses and sometimes saying no to yourself, actually you come to a higher and greater and more wonderful state of existence. On the contrary, if you accept the Torah, fine. And if not, if you go only by your impulse and only by what you think is good, that will be your burial place. And so, my conclusion, Torah was given to man to see beyond what is apparent. And that gives us freedom of choice to go against the impulses, the natural impulses, natural inclinations, even if they're intellectually sound. The angels couldn't go beyond their intellectual observation and therefore did not fulfill what God wanted truly. And that's the idea that not that the angel was punished, but the angels was raised to a higher level of understanding to see their error. And that's the idea that the earth was cursed. It wasn't cursed. It was shown the error of its ways, and the earth had to compensate in order to be able to come to a higher and greater understanding. Man, especially the children of Israel through the Torah, are given the option of fulfilling God's will and going beyond their understanding. And therefore we have freedom of choice to go against our impulse, against our desires, above our natural ways in order to fulfill God's ways. And if we do that, that will give us blessings. There's another dimension of the Torah, which is the revelation of God, which is prophecy. And that too is found in the Decalogue. Amazingly, it says that God said all of these words before the Decalogue, said all of these words. So saying, says Rav Yitzchak in the Medrash, that all of the prophecies, future generations, were all stated in the Decalogue. So the Torah reveals not only the wisdom of the world, not only does it teach us how to live, how to go above and beyond ourselves, but the Torah also teaches us the ways of God, the ways of going beyond the physical and even beyond the spiritual. For the ways of prophecy are beyond the spiritual. They are the godly, and God is beyond spiritual or physical. And so, let's celebrate. Today is the 15th day of Shvat, and it says man is like a tree. And today is the holiday of the trees, the idea being that through the Torah, we reach the highest level of spirituality. And that's what a fruit is. A fruit reaches the highest level within mankind. That's the idea of pleasure. Not physical pleasure, but the ultimate experience of the person is beyond wisdom. It is to understand the delights of God as it's revealed to the Torah. And this happens every year when we receive the Torah on the 6th day of the week in the Parsha of Yisro, which is going to be in 2 days. But it's strengthened and it's enhanced and made into a palpable reality by the idea of the Rosh Hashanah of trees, because the tree and man are the same. Man is a tree, in a way. Man gives fruit. The deeds of man are fruit, which give delight to God and delight to us all.